Hi there, in today's video I'm going to show you how to successfully eradicate and paint over mould and mildew stains that formed in a badly ventilated area, which is so common in areas where you've got poor air circulation. In today's video we're going to be using Zinsser's Universal Degreaser and Cleaner and Mould Killer and Remover. We're then going to be using Zinsser's BIN Primer Sealer Stain Killer and Perma White Interior Paint Top Coat. Step 1, preparation. So all surfaces want to be clean, dry and free from anything that will lessen the adhesion of the paint. Where you can, remove all loose and failing material with a stiff bristle brush to a sound edge. And feather those sound edges with a fine grade abrasive sandpaper. I'm using 120 grit here. Then give the surface a really good clean with Zinsser's Universal Degreaser and Cleaner. Make sure that, unlike me, you use your rubber gloves here and rinse thoroughly to remove any residue. With a dehumidifier running for a couple of hours and a good wash down with the degreaser and cleaner, and the wall is already looking so much better. Next, it's time to treat all mould affected areas with Zinsser's Mould Killer and Remover. We spray the mould killer directly onto the surface and leave it to dry before painting. It's a good idea at this stage to fill any cracks or surface defects with a suitable filler. In my case, this involved a 2-part wood filler on the skirting board and a gypsum based wall filler on a few surface defects. You want to allow these to set and again rub them down with a fine grade abrasive sandpaper, removing all dust with a vacuum, and then the finishing flourish here was to recork the skirting board. Okay, so we're on to the all-important priming stage, and for this we're going to be using Zinsser Bin. Perfect for interior ceilings, walls, doors, and also spot priming on exterior metal trims, PVC and wood. What's perhaps most remarkable about this paint is it's dry in 15 minutes and recoatable in 45, which means you can get so much more painting done during the day. I'm using my mini 4.5-inch roller to prime all stained, bare and filled areas with one coat of BIN. For larger areas you might want to consider using a 9-inch roller, and you should allow 45 minutes drying time in normal conditions. This paint is so quick drying it's tempting to apply more than one coat, and in this situation I had a little bit of a line between the primed area and the rest of the wall, which I felt I needed to feather so that it wasn't obvious when I applied the top coat. And so we're on to the final stage of decorating with 2 full coats of Zinsser Perma White. Why is this paint so good for this application? Well, it's mould resistant and contains a biocide which protects against fungal degradation. It bonds to multiple surfaces such as existing solvent-based or glossy paints, flat paint, new drywall, cement block and concrete. And it's ideally suited for any area of persistent high humidity, frequent temperature changes and poor air circulation. It comes in a matte and satin finish, it's touch dry in 30 minutes, recoatable in 2 hours. And finally it's tintable. And one thing that strikes me when using this paint is just how impressive the coverage is. And with the first coat now fully dry, all that remains is for me to apply a second coat to the wall. Now the downside of this being a shellac based paint is you're going to need to use Zinsser's own brush cleaner. However, I don't see this as being a massive issue, because if anything the paintbrush with the shellac paint on is, I think, easier to clean than your typical solvent-based, oil-based paint. What I tend to do is get as much of the paint off as I can. I tend to have a clean jar with some brush cleaner in it, and then an old jar with a lid on which has historic brush cleaner, and I'll clean off the majority, give it a final rinse in the jar of new brush cleaner. Mould forms for a reason. It forms when moisture in the air is deposited on a cold surface, and that means that this cold surface is damp. And this felt wet to the touch just after I'd pulled away the storage unit. So if you can get hold of a dehumidifier, for example, to remove the moisture from the wall, fantastic. Or at the very least, get a heater in the room to dry out the wall as much as possible. So you've dried out the surface and prepared it for painting. And the paints we use today will prevent that mould coming back through in the future. But speaking of the future, you want to prevent new mould forming down the line. And to do that, you've got to tackle the sources of the mould in the first place, which in my case were bad air circulation and damp. I did a video comprehensively dealing with all this a couple of weeks ago, and a link to that is coming up on the screen now.